And, Mr. Chairman, this bill is constitutional carry. It's what I began by describing last week. This expands freedom significantly in our state and makes it clear that if you're 21 years of age or older, or if you're 18, have been honorably discharged from the military, and you're lawfully in possession of a gun in a place where you're lawfully allowed to be, then there will be no criminal penalties against you. Again, lawful gun owners who are allowed to possess their gun in their home, their business, their car, their bicycle, their boat, will be able to carry their firearm without having to pay a fee or get a license from the government to exercise their freedom. That's what this amendment does.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Are there any questions from the members in regards to this amendment? Yes, sir. Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just looking for some clarification from the sponsor. So would this be open or concealed or both?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This would be either, exactly as the current carry permit allows. It would be for handguns, so this would not be long guns. That is a distinction. There are a couple different bills on this subject that all, in my opinion, expand freedom, but this would be restricted to handguns.
Okay.
But open or concealed.
The medical research, as you're aware, neurological in particular, suggests that, I'm not going to put it fancy, I'm just going to say it, that most folks don't have a mature brain until they're 25. And the part of the brain that's last to develop is the part that controls impulse. So with that said, I'm going to ask that you consider raising the qualifying age to 25, and that's the end of my statement. Thank you, sir.
Representative.
So there are literally thousands and thousands of young men that stormed the beaches of Normandy that would disagree with you that at 18 and up they should be able to bleed for our country and die for our country and should be able to exercise all the freedoms of our country. So while their brain may not be as mature as possible, their freedom is as mature and should be protected.
Representative Vice Chairman Sexton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leader Lambert, I wanted to bring up the point that in your mind, I think this bill is called constitutional carry. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Not just in my mind. I mean, it is constitutional carry. I mean, there are some criminal penalties that are included within here that enhance penalties on, again, convicted felons and stalkers and everything else, but the portion of this bill that was in the previous amendment is constitutional carry. It preserves your constitutional rights.
What does that mean, constitutional carry?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, and thank you for asking that question, Mr. Vice Chairman. I mean, you know, the Second Amendment preserves your right to bear arms. It's an individual liberty. It's been found that way by the U.S. not only U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights, but by the U.S. Supreme Court and D.C. v. Heller. I mean, it is an individual right to bear arms that shall not be infringed. And if you're convicted of a crime or declared mentally incompetent, it can be infringed because of those circumstances. But for every other law-abiding citizen out there, every single American, I mean, your right to bear arms shall not be infringed. And that's what the amendment that we just passed a second ago does. It prevents any infringement on your right to bear arms.
So it's my understanding, and I will ask you if you agree with this, that whenever that the permit was imposed, it would be unconstitutional. And what we're trying to do here is to bring it back into agreement with the Constitution that we have the right to keep and bear arms. And we as lawmakers, as you've done with this amendment, you're wanting to protect the law-abiding against the lawbreakers by saying that if you've committed these offenses, you're going to lose some privileges. But your constitutional right, according to the Second Amendment, is that you have that freedom as a law-abiding citizen. You don't have to prove to anyone, to law enforcement or anyone, that you're a law-abiding citizen. Would you agree that that is the essence of your bill and all of this talk about a permit is really not relevant to our Second Amendment right?
Please.
Yes, sir, absolutely. I mean, and in fact, in the permit system, it requires you, if asked by an officer, to present your permit and basically be inspected anytime you want. So not only are you giving up your Second Amendment rights, you're giving up your Fourth Amendment rights under the permit process. That's simply wrong. I mean, under the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, you have a right to be free from government encumbrance in your life. And both the Second and Fourth Amendment say you shouldn't have to do that. This bill resolves that, and by the way, it prevents you from being thrown in jail for merely exercising your Second Amendment right when you've done nothing else wrong. Our current law, unless you get permission from the state and pay a fee and go to a class, by the way, a one-time class that hypothetically is supposed to be good for the rest of your life, and that's laughable for anybody that deals with firearms. I mean, regular training is what's needed. But, I mean, under our current permit process, it is, I think, certainly a violation of your Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment rights, and others, because unless you've got that permit and paid that fee, you can't fulfill the destiny that our founders intended in this country to be able to exercise your freedoms.
One more question, and then I'll conclude. Maybe it's more of a statement than it is a question. I want to commend you for bringing this legislation to help us to gain back some of the freedoms that we've lost. It's certainly, that's what it is. It was never required for a permit, and all this talk about permit is unconstitutional. I wish that we would understand it that way. Thank you. I'll be voting for this.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Beck, I'll give you one here.
Okay, just real quick. Permitless carrying is not to restrict someone to have a permit to carry is not unconstitutional. That has been tried over and over. As you're very well aware, Representative Sexton, there is you can put certain temperaments on the Constitution, such as I can't yell fire right now, and that's not violating my freedom of speech. So it's been tried over and over. Constitutional carry is not an absolute right when you're talking about the safety and welfare of our police and other citizens. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that. Thank you.
Yes, sir, Representative Sexton.
That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Constitutional carry is just that, constitutional carry. Sometimes the courts get it wrong, but our forefathers got it right. And no matter how much you say it or how you say it, this right shall not be infringed upon. It was given to us by our forefathers. And with all due respect, you're an attorney, I'm not, and I don't mean that to disparage you, but I honestly do believe it's a ridiculous argument. Thank you.
Leader?
Mr. Chairman, I will say, and Representative Beck, who knows the law very well, and legally speaking, what he has said is under the law and under what the rulings have been, your rights can be curtailed. But we can also grant greater rights here in Tennessee than are granted under the U.S. Constitution. And we are choosing, in the passage of this bill, to grant greater rights. And I will reference that back in the 70s, there were certain cities that thought it was a good idea to ban firearms in their cities completely. And thankfully, our U.S. Supreme Court struck that down in D.C. v. Heller and found that you have an individual right to bear arms. It's not connected to the militia section of the Second Amendment. That's a separate clause. It is separate from your individual right to bear arms. And so, while both gentlemen have have stated accurate comments, I just want to say what we are really doing here is choosing to grant greater rights under the Second Amendment than the bare minimum that is required under the U.S. and federal standard.